Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Basics, where we take a great kit and look at how we can push it a little bit further to get the most out of your build. Before we get started, it's worth mentioning that the kit on the bench today is the Messerschmitt Me 410A-3, which was originally released as a 2025 Club Exclusive. It's one of those kits that a lot of people either missed the first time round or have been thinking about revisiting, and it's available to purchase for club members in 2026. Which is great news if you fancy approaching it with a bit more experience under your belt or trying something a little different. For this build, we're going with a captured RAF colour scheme, which immediately gives the model a bit of character and a story to tell. It's one of those schemes that stands out in a display cabinet and sparks a bit of curiosity, which is always a bonus. But as ever, we begin in the cockpit, and this is where it's very easy to overthink things. There are around 11 parts to deal with here, and while the instructions suggest specific colours, the reality is the reference material for this aircraft isn't exactly definitive. Rather than getting stuck chasing exact shades, the better approach is to aim for something that looks convincing. A dark grey works perfectly well for the interior. It gives you a solid base and, more importantly, lets you focus on bringing out the detail rather than worrying about whether the tone is absolutely spot on. At this stage, it's worth thinking a step ahead. Anything that's going to be difficult to reach later should be painted before assembly. The gun barrels are a good example of this, as they're much easier to finish in black before everything is closed up. The instrument panels use decals, which are a great way to get a clean finish, but if you're planning to use them, it's worth removing the raised detail first. A quick trim back with snips and a blade gives you a smooth surface that helps the decals settle properly and avoids that slightly uneven look you can sometimes get. Because we're working in 72nd scale, some of the finer details can disappear if you're too subtle. This is where you can afford to push things a little. Dry brushing with a lighter grey across edges and raised areas helps lift the detail. And while it might look a bit exaggerated up close, it reads much better once everything is enclosed. Small elements can be picked out with paint markers, which are quick and effective, and even something as simple as running a pencil over the gun barrels gives a convincing metallic finish with very little effort. Once the cockpit is assembled and painted, it can be fitted into the fuselage, but it's a good idea not to rush into closing everything up straight away. Taking a moment to apply a protective coat, something like a satin varnish, helps seal in your work and makes handling the model a bit easier as we move forward. It's a small step, but it can save you from having to fix things later. From there, attention shifts to the wings, and this is where it pays to be methodical. Depending on the version you're building, there may be holes to drill or sections to modify. In this case, we're working on a variant that requires holes for aerials underneath the wing, so it's worth double checking the instructions and making sure those are done before you start assembling anything. It's one of those details that's easy to miss, but awkward to correct later. The wing assembly itself is nicely designed, and once the internal structures like the spar and undercarriage bays are in place, the wings fit into the fuselage in a very satisfying way. It's one of those moments where the model really starts to come together. When adding the upper wing sections, it's best to take your time and work around gradually, securing each section in turn rather than trying to glue everything at once. It leads to a much cleaner finish and avoids unnecessary gaps. As you continue, the kit gives you a few options that allow you to add a bit of personality to the build. The leading edge slats can be positioned open or closed, the tailplane can be straight or slightly drooped, and the radiators can be adjusted as well. These choices might seem minor, but they make a noticeable difference to the overall feel of the model. In this case, going with open slats and a slightly drooped tailplane helps give the impression of an aircraft at rest, which adds a bit more life to the finished piece. The canopy is probably the most delicate part of the build and one that rewards patience. The fit is quite tight, so taking the time to dry fit everything first is essential. Using tape or bands to gently hold parts in place can help with alignment. And when it comes to gluing, using something like a canopy adhesive or glue and glaze reduces the risk of fogging. Working on one section at a time and allowing it to fully dry before moving on makes the whole process much more manageable and helps avoid mistakes. With the canopy in place, the model is ready for paint. Starting with a primer coat allows you to check for any imperfections, and once you're happy with the surface, you can begin applying the main colours. The captured RAF scheme creates a strong contrast, particularly with the yellow undersides and the darker camouflage on top. There's no need to overcomplicate things here. A clean application with a bit of natural variation is more than enough to achieve a convincing result. Once the painting is complete, a gloss coat prepares the surface for decals. Applying this by brush can be just as effective as spraying if done carefully, and it often saves time. When it comes to decals, using warm water helps them release more easily and settle into place. A bit of gentle pressure with a cotton bud and some controlled heat from a hairdryer can help them conform nicely without relying too heavily on additional solutions. With the decals in place and sealed, the final stage of the build are all about bringing everything together. The undercarriage can be a little fiddly, so it's worth taking your time to get everything aligned properly. Once the model is sitting on its legs, the smaller details like aerials, exhausts and propellers can be added. These finishing touches really help complete the look and give the model that final bit of presence. Weathering on this build is kept fairly light. A small amount of exhaust staining is enough to break up the finish and add a touch of realism without overwhelming the scheme. It's always tempting to keep adding more, but in this case, restraint works in your favour. And with that, the build is complete. The ME 410 in captured RAF colours makes for a striking model, and it's a kit that offers plenty of detail without becoming overly complicated. There's a lot going on beneath the surface, and even if not all of it is immediately visible, it all contributes to the final result. If it's a kit you didn't get around to the first time, or one you're tempted to revisit with a slightly different approach, it's certainly worth a look while it's available again. Either way, hopefully this has given you a few ideas to take your own build that step further. That's it for this episode, and we'll see you next time in Beyond the Basics.